Hi, I'm Susie. I'm so glad you're here. I just want to remind you that I believe that adopting a negotiator mindset is essential for personal and professional success. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And people often ask me, what is a negotiator mindset? And what the thing about it is, we look at negotiation as something that's done to us. That is, it's manipulative, and so I believe that negotiation is a tool and not a weapon. So I want you to think about negotiation differently today. Think about it as a strategic way to navigate life, build relationships, and think about your impact at work and at home. So let's just jump in. Today, I want to talk about listening. I remember as a kid, my mom used to tell me and my dad, there's five kids in the family, and I'm the fifth of five. And she would always tell me and my dad that we were both good listeners. And I remember in my head going, I don't want to be a good listener. Like, that doesn't sound like it's very easy, very hard to do. All you have to do is just be quiet. And it took me a long time to really appreciate that as a compliment. And now I really understand that listening is so underrated. We all know it's important, but very few people do it well. And even as a coach, sometimes I'm one on one with people and they're paying me a lot of money to be there. And when I'm giving them some advice or talking to them, I can tell they're distracted or they're not really tuned into what I'm saying. And it just baffles me sometimes that we believe that whether we're stressed and we have so much to do and we have so many things going on in our head that we're not in the moment, that gets in our way sometimes. And or just being able to think about what we want to say or what point we want to make. We get so in our seat. And the key to negotiation is to really get out of your head and into the other person's perspective, not to give them leverage over your point or not to give them any kind of insight to how they can use what they leverage against you. It's really to understand what are their interests. And when we're good listeners, we're really great humans because we think about what's important to the other person. We think about their interests. We don't just think about what we want to say next. We consider what has been said. And so I want to give you some keys, some approaches to listening and how it relates to negotiation. It's so key. And I am so grateful now to my mom for telling me that I'm a good listener because it made me be really conscientious of that attribute that I naturally have. And I'll tell you, it is not something that is easy for me, especially when I'm triggered emotionally. When I'm talking to somebody and I'm frustrated with them, or they're talking too slow, or they're giving me too many details. I can tell you that people very close to me will will tell you that sometimes I'll be like, just get to the point, and I'll try to help them improve their communication by giving it to me differently. And sometimes giving people that space to let them communicate in the way they need to is helpful to them because they have the need to be able to get out what they need. Sometimes that's an emotional release for people to be able to really unload by talking. I know that as an extrovert, that sometimes just being able to have the space to empty what is in my mind out, so that space is a luxury for me. And I get frustrated when people aren't good listeners to me. So I try to think of all those things when I'm listening to other people, is to be really present. And so we'll talk about those keys of listening. I want you to think about listening. Do you know that we listen the least to the people that are closest to us? And that's because we get used to what they say. We know their cadence. We can anticipate, how long it's going to take them to say something. So we give them the proper amount of space. Then we start listening right at the end, the tail of what they're saying, so that we can get to that space and be able to say, okay, this is what I want to say now. So think about the way you listen in a lot of different situations, because being a good negotiator is about understanding. Because in negotiation, if you're not listening to the next steps you need to take to get that person to say yes, or to help them understand your frame, you'll miss an opportunity to get to the close. And along the way, by practicing this great art of listening, is going to make you a better human, a better partner, a better leader, a better peer, a better parent. We're going to talk about what it's like to be a good and a bad listener. As I mentioned, my mom always said I was a really good listener, and I think I took that for granted, especially really early in my career. It didn't take me long to think of a few examples of when I wasn't a good listener. And this was professionally. I think I could find a lot related to my personal life. Just like the research that I said shows that we don't listen to the people that are closest to us. We pay more attention to the people we don't know, because we don't know what they're going to say, or we don't know that much about them. So I think maybe our curiosity drives our ability to be a keen listener. But I remember we were negotiating, and I was the main person that was doing kind of the talking at the table. And it was a big deal for us. So there were a few people in the room. And that's the only reason I know about the story, because I was not listening well enough. I missed a bunch of things that the other side said. Well, sometimes when you prepare so well, you have to be a better listener when you get to the table. Because if you prepare so much and you anticipate what the other party will say, and you believe you know what their interests are, then when you get there, sometimes your ego gets in the way of being able to actually just listen to hear what they have to say. Because you are probably wrong about, not, I guess, not specifically wrong about their position, but there might be nuances to it that you didn't anticipate. And even taking the time to make the other person feel heard allows them to understand that you're not manipulating them, you're listening to them. So when you are right, and you're the way that you had prepared for the negotiation goes seamlessly, if you signal to them that you're not even paying attention to them, but you're kind of letting the negotiation happen without them, you're not going to have as rich of a relationship at the end. Because when they don't feel like they've been listened to, then they will feel like they were taken advantage of. And it might not even have been the case. Extroverts and introverts, the study shows that introverts and extroverts don't negotiate as well as the person that's like right in the middle of those two personalities. And the reason is, and this is just true for great communication, is that both parties need to be heard. So an extrovert tends to, and I'm one, so I can say this with clarity, an extrovert tends to talk, and sometimes talk to think. So filling the space when there should be some silence for the other person, especially if you're not negotiating with an extrovert. So being thoughtful about what are your natural tendencies, because an extrovert feels like they just need to tell their story, and they believe that they listen really well, and they might be listening really well, but they're not giving the signs to the other side that they've listened, because silence is something that signals that you're actually listening to the other side. And an introvert tends to not tell the story enough, doesn't illustrate the benefit. They tend to listen more. And so it's a nice balance between the two. The best negotiators are ones that are ambiverts, which is a nice combination of being able to tell the story and to listen and illustrate to the other side that you've heard them. So the negotiation that I remember specifically, we had prepared for a few weeks. We knew exactly what are the things that we wanted in the priority list of what we wanted. And I was going to be the lead on it. And we had anticipated what their needs were and what their priorities were. So I had been so practiced and we had done it all together that I kind of went into my da 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 da. I was like doing what I had practiced about making the value statements and helping them understand our position and showing that I had compassion and understood their side. And early on, I was so in my head about how this needed to go because I had rehearsed it so many times that I missed that they gave us our second point really early on. So I just kept going and going and justifying it. And they were letting me go and go. And finally, the person said, "We already gave that to you. I don't know what and they kind of got frustrated with me because it was obvious that I wasn't listening to them. And that doesn't feel good when you aren't being listened to. It doesn't feel good. So the negotiation didn't go well. I think we ended up signing a deal, but we didn't get the contract, the terms that we wanted. I got really flustered because of that, and I wasn't confident. And we got the bare minimum of what we wanted on service level, on agreement time frame, and on the revenue associated to it. And it was just because I missed a point that somebody had already given us. In Chris Voss's book, he's a FBI negotiator, Never Split the Difference. He talks about during a hijack situation, when they're on the phone and he's negotiating with the hostage, the person that's the hostage is holding the people hostage. They have 7 people on the phone. Think about that. 7 people can hear different things, inflections, words that were used, maybe even like some of the nonverbals that you could hear, and that he has them listen for all different reasons. That just blows me away to think we believe that we listen really well, but there's so much we miss. And especially the research shows too, when we are distracted by something like a noise or what is going on in our head, we tend to focus on that and we don't hear or we don't observe other things around us. So think about that for you. All right, so 3 things that you can put in place right away. Now, this art of listening has so many different tips that you could have, but I am going to give you 3 that you should think about this week. So the first one is to think about and plan to be a good listener. The first one is look at a conversation that's coming up for you. And it can't just be just a regular conversation of how's the weather kind of thing. It has to have an outcome that is of interest to you and a little bit of a challenge. But find one conversation that you're going to have this week, let's just say in the next 2 days, where you can be an active listener. Meaning like your intention is to go in and say, okay, I'm going to challenge myself to listen more than I talk. And a good rule of thumb, this is for leaders, so this can be implemented for anybody, is to listen 70% of the time and talk 30% of the time. And I'll tell you, I have leaders, senior leaders, that will say to me, I listen all the time. All I do is listen. I hardly ever talk. So that percentage of my listening is probably higher than 70%. And then I talk to their people and I'll talk to them over time and they'll be like, my boss, they'll just happen to mention when they get on a staff meeting, all that he does is talk the entire time. And then I'll go back to that senior leader and they'll still have this impression. And it's not that yes, they're unaware, but they also just believe they're listening more. So do something to count how you listen, or maybe you have your timer on your phone and you're not paying attention to it, but when you stop talking, maybe you start the timer and see how long it is. Keep yourself honest around that. So that's the first one, is observe yourself. How much are you listening in a regular conversation? Not just a how's the weather conversation, but something that has a little bit of meat to it, something that has an outcome that's important to you. So the second one is to challenge yourself to repeat back some of the key points that the other person's saying. And you don't want to be obvious. You don't want to go into this and go, I'm working on my listening skills, and so I'm going to repeat back what you've been saying. When you're talking to somebody, just out of the blue, just say, oh, that's really interesting. What I heard you said was that you've had a rough couple days. What do you think that's from? Or just highlight something they said. And even a good one is to go, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about the fact that if you get on your Peloton first thing in the morning, so repeat back what they said, that it forces you to listen so that you can put together something that it has to do with exactly what they said. Because what our tendency is somebody says that and we go to our point. So we're bouncing back and forth, and we're not allowing it to have kind of like, instead of it having dividers, like a clear, what I'm saying, what you're saying, what I'm saying, what you're saying, think about it as being integrated. So say something about what they said and then make your point. So that's the second thing, is to repeat back something they said. And then the third one, and this will help you with the second one too, but the third one is, in your head, as you are participating in this conversation, catch yourself from starting to formulate what you're going to say in response to what that person is currently saying. Because listen, when you're starting to formulate what you're going to say, you're not paying attention to what they are saying at the moment. So instead of formulating what you're going to say next, listen with intention, even allow there to be space, and make your mind think about what you're going to ask to understand more. And before you make your point, ask at least one question. What that does is it shifts it. The other thing about that is, when we listen and we ask questions, it makes the other person really feel heard and they feel cared for. When we listen with intention, we are showing how much we care for the other person. We're building that trust. And so that's what's really important in a negotiation. That's key. People only like to do deals with people they know, like, and trust. Good listeners exhibit those. It's giving those, they're showing you how much they care, or that they trust you, and they want you to trust them too. So the three are: think about a conversation that's coming up and make the choice to actively listen. Pay attention to how much you're listening. Try to figure out what metric it is for you, so that you can you can baseline where you need to go to become a better listener. The second one is to challenge yourself to say back some key points of what that person said, to show them you want to deeply understand what they're saying. But just key on something and see if you can just be curious about it. Oh, that's really interesting. This is what I heard that you said. And restate their point that they made. And then it also makes them feel like you care about what they're saying. Wow, just imagine this. And then the third thing is to stop that mind chatter. Stop thinking about what you're going to say next and focus on what you're going to ask next to know more. So curiosity is a key in this one. Is how are you going to, what question are you going to ask next to that person? And you may need time to think, which is fine. And you can practice silence as a part of that too. So those are our key takeaways. All right. So this is where, as an executive coach, I have to challenge you, and I'll think through what I'm going to do as well. Because the only way to put these things into practice is to find a way that and commit to how you're going to do it next. I gave you those 3 tips, but this means these are the commitments that you're going to make and what you need to do to change it up, because that's the only way to adopt it. And when you adopt a negotiator mindset and you think about these things, it becomes more natural for you. It might be something that you have to be really thoughtful about at the beginning, but these things just will start coming naturally the more you practice. So here we go. What is one thing you're going to stop doing? Oh, that's a hard one for listening. I say my mom said I was a good listener. You might think that I just do it well because I'm an executive coach. And I've started to stop doing this, and I'm really trying to hold my opinion or my advice and ask a question before I insert what I want or what I think would help that person. So I'm going to stop um, talking or giving my opinion. I'm going to first ask a question. So I'm going to substitute it with question. I'm taking one of my tips and I'm changing it a little bit. So what are you going to stop doing? What are you going to stop doing from what I said? Maybe it's listening better to the people around you, since I said the research shows we don't. Maybe it's changing that metric, the 70-30. So what are you going to stop doing? What are you going to start doing? What did I say today that you need to go, okay, I need to start doing? I really like the tip about thinking about the next thing you're going to ask instead of the next thing you're going to say. And I'm cheating because it's what I'm going to stop doing. Stop was going to be, I'm going to stop to give my opinion. Start, I'm going to ask more questions. So I'm kind of using both of those. I think asking questions is so powerful, and it really illustrates to people that you care and you're listening. So I'm going to ask more questions before I say anything else. And I'm also going to be more silent. I think I'm going to give myself two things: ask more questions. I'm going to be more silent. So what are you going to start doing? What are you going to do differently after hearing some of these things about listening? What came to mind for you? What are you going to start doing? I'd love for you to tell me. And then what are you going to continue doing? We always, there are things that we do really well. So I'm going to continue. I have a lot of energy, as you can tell when I talk to people, and I'm pretty good at eye contact, and I get the feedback that people feel really pulled in, and I think it has to do with my I have an intention for people, and I love to connect with people. So I'm going to continue that. I'm going to really have faith that that comes across as genuine and warm, and I'm going to continue to do that. So what are you proud of yourself about? What have you been doing well? Who have you been listening well to? Those are all things to consider. So what are you going to stop doing? What are you going to start doing? And what are you going to continue to do? Listening is something, as leaders, it's super important for us to be thoughtful about that. And sometimes going into a meeting, instead of running the meeting that is your meeting, that is a status meeting, handing it off to somebody else and letting them run the meeting, changing up your habits so that you can kind of like disrupt your own thinking, your own cadence of how this meeting runs or how this conversation goes. Let somebody else start first. So this art of listening is, I'm sorry to tell you, it's something you're going to have to work on for probably the rest of your life. I've had to, and I know I'm still a work in progress. So please tell me your stories. I'd love to hear what your advice is. What really resonated with you today? And what, as you go through this next week or these next few days, I'd love to hear, had this inspired you to make a change, and have you seen some good outcomes from it? I'd love to hear from you. If you want to learn more about, I have a book on the art of everyday negotiation without manipulation. And I have an email that is called Monday Minute that I send out every Monday. It's just about incorporating these mindset shifts so you can adopt a negotiator mindset. And they're just stories from my life. So if you want that, I have a website just for finding out more about my book or working with me or just joining the free Monday Minute. I'd love for you to be a part of the network, and I'd love to have you committed to adopting a negotiator mindset. You can find that at negotiationlove.com, because I love negotiation and so should you. So it's just negotiationlove.com, and I'll have all the things you can click on if you want more information. I'm Susie Tomanchuk. I was so glad you were here. Thanks for watching or listening to how to adopt a negotiator mindset. And remember, negotiation is more than a skill, it's a mindset.